take a minute to just look around this room. What an incredible blessing. Looking around this room, it's a machaya. Rosh Hashanah, the new year. Rosh Hashanah, the rabbis call it Yom Harat Olam. Many people translate that as the celebration of the birthday of the world, of creation. Actually, Yom Harat Olam comes from the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah, when he uses that, it's the first time we see that phrase, Yom Harat Olam, he says it because things are looking so bleak and so terrible and so awful that he wishes he'd never been born. And the way that he expresses that is that his mother should have been pregnant, Harat Olam, Olam, forever. His mother should have stayed pregnant forever. Gili's not going to sleep tonight just thinking about that possibility. But the rabbis, in an incredible, radical rereading of that, they don't read it, Harat Olam, pregnant forever. Instead, they read Harat Olam, not Olam as forever, but Olam as universe. The day that we celebrate the pregnancy of the universe with itself. This is the day we celebrate the fact that creation happened at all, that the Big Bang happened, that sentient life evolved on this planet from one-celled organisms. The incredible improbability of existence, of reality being here at all. Yom Harat Olam. The rabbis who crafted this service, the rabbis who called this holiday Yom Harat Olam, they also lived through really difficult times. Really difficult times. This year has been a really difficult year. Every single person who has the chutzpah to stand on a bima on these high holidays and try to find something to say is struggling, just like me, to figure out what is it we can possibly say at a moment like this. After this year, the time that we're living through as a people, what an incredibly difficult year as a people. As a nation coming up on elections that are already fraught. Half of our country will likely be angry at the result of the election. I am giving a sermon for the first time without Judy Griffith looking over it to make sure it makes any sense, because she died in May. An incredibly difficult year for all of us. On Yom Kippur, we will focus on our mortality. It's what we do. We focus on the fact that our human lives, unless you're Al and Lynn Avens, are short. They're very short, insultingly short. If you remember, I quoted the book 4,000 Weeks. For people who are aware that we will die, these lives are insultingly short. And yet, what an incredible gift we are given. So on Yom Kippur, we'll focus on mortality, but not today. Today, Yom Harat Olam, we celebrate what the German Jewish philosopher Hannah Arendt called natality. The Greeks focused on mortality. They called us mortals. That's how you refer to human beings. We're mortals because we are finite beings. But there's a rabbinic perspective that says the fact that we are here at all is a miracle. The fact that we can even be listening to words and having them register, the fact that we have spirits in these bodies is an amazing gift, the gift of natality. And that we keep having young people born into this world means that there are always new ideas, new ways of looking at things. The improbable becomes possible. That is what we celebrate on Yom Harat Olam. Richard Dawkins, the British evolutionary biologist, says, we are going to die. And that makes us the lucky ones. Most people are never going to die because they're never going to be born. The potential people who could have been here in my place, but who will in fact never see the light of day, outnumber the grains of sand of Arabia. Certainly those unborn ghosts include greater poets than Keats, scientists greater than Newton. We know this because the set of possible people allowed by our DNA so massively exceeds the set of actual people. In the teeth of these stupefying odds, it is you and I in our ordinariness that are here. We privileged few who won the lottery of birth against all odds. How dare we whine at our inevitable return to that prior state from which the vast majority have never stirred. This has been one of the only things to get me through this past year. Truly, this shift of perspective. The fact that we're here at all is such a privilege. It is too short. We'll talk about that next week. It is too short. And most human beings will never exist. What an extraordinary privilege that we get to be here celebrating once again Yom Harat Olam. Possibility. That's what the rabbis celebrate as we start the new year. They celebrate natality, possibility. The universe pregnant with potential, with possibility. Many of us turn to thinkers way smarter than we are at this time of year as we prepare for a message to give at these high holy days. This year, a colleague recommended the book by Susan Neiman called Why Grow Up? Talking about adulting in an age that celebrates being infantile. We glorify childhood. We glorify youth. Youth is wasted on the young, all that stuff. But actually, the only way we really have agency in the world, the only time we're really able to actualize our own potential is in adulthood. Why grow up? Even if we make it to a certain age, some of us don't grow up. Because it's so much easier to stay in one of two responses to the fact that the world doesn't match what we're told it should be. There's two responses. You either double down, there's a reason for this and we just don't understand it. It's all okay. The world is okay. It's all going to be fine. There's a bigger plan. We just don't know what it is. That's childhood. You double down. This is also fundamentalism. It doubles down. And that's extraordinarily comfortable and comforting. That's not me. That's not most of us in this room. The other option is to say, to hell with it then. It is what it is. I'm just going to get as much as I can. I'm going to be as comfortable as I can. And forget all those values that I was told was how the world was supposed to work, the kind of person I should be. Who cares? It's all short. It goes like that. It is what it is. That is cynicism. That is adolescence. Turning on all the values we were raised with and saying, nope, I reject it because the world doesn't match what we're told it should be. That's not adulting. The world needs adults. Adults are people who say the world is not as it should be, but we don't give up on wanting the world to be closer to what it should be. That is her argument in the book, Why Grow Up? She says being a mature adult means standing in the gap between the way the world is and the way we want it to be. Keeping one eye on the way the world ought to be while never losing sight of the way it is requires permanent, precarious balance. It requires facing squarely the fact that you'll never get the world that you want while refusing to talk yourself out of wanting it. That is Yitz Greenberg, the great Rabbi Yitz Greenberg. It's the argument of his opus work. He's been living his whole life to write this piece to give to us. That is the definition of covenant. Accepting that the world is not what we want it to be, but not giving up on the commitment to moving it one step closer to what it can and ought to be. That's the work of being a grown-up. That's the work of spiritual adulting. That's our work. And we get deeply in touch with that at these High Holy Days. She quotes, and you can look it up when you get home on YouTube, just do monkey, grape, cucumber, and you'll get a YouTube video of an experiment done where the lab person, she goes to 2 cages of monkeys, 2 female monkeys, and they, not apes, monkeys, the little ones, and she puts out her hand, and if the monkey gives her a rock, she gives it a piece of cucumber. And she does this with each one, and they give her a rock, and she gives them a cucumber. And this goes on for a while because the monkeys are perfectly happy to give her a rock in exchange for a cucumber. Until she gives this monkey a cucumber, goes to the second one, it gives her a rock, and she gives it a grape. Well, monkeys like grapes a whole lot more than they like cucumbers, it turns out. Monkey number 1 witnesses this. She asks for a rock. The monkey number 1 gives her a rock, and she gives it a piece of cucumber. The monkey goes crazy. Crazy. Starts pulling on the bars, starts screeching, and takes the cucumber and throws it at the lab tech. She puts out her hand, asks for a rock. Monkey says, "No way. No way," and then starts grabbing the bars and screeching at her again. This image stuck with me because this is exactly how so many of us feel. It turns out we are wired to hate injustice. It's way back on the family tree, way further back than Homo sapiens sapien, way further back than Australopithecus africanus or Australopithecus forensis. It goes all the way back to little monkeys who go nuts when they witness injustice. Notice the monkey didn't turn on the other monkey. Who did the monkey turn on? The lab tech, because it was the lab tech's fault. That's what we're doing right now, so many of us, me included, after this year. I feel like we're all just walking around with cucumbers, ready to throw it at the first white lab coat we see. Whose fault is it? How much of what we hear on the news, how much of what we watch, how much of what we read is about whose fault is it? And then throw something at them. Because we're so angry that the world isn't what it should be. That this world sometimes feels like it's out of control. We are anxious, we are activated, we are impatient, we are angry. Most of all, we want to know who to blame. And throw that cucumber. As good as that feels, we know, to be grown-ups means we have to accept the responsibility. We have to take responsibility for moving the world one step closer from what it is to what it should be. We celebrate this Rosh Hashanah. We celebrate it according to Rabbi Michal Kentor, who is a progressive rabbi in Megiddo, Israel. We celebrate it at the new moon. This is the only festival we celebrate at a new moon, at the dark of the moon. And in Israel, where all of our holidays originate, and they're all tied to the agricultural seasons, everything right now, what's happening to everything in Israel right now, if you're a farmer, it's all drying up and turning yellow and dying and withering. And nothing will grow again until Pesach, until spring. Why? Why? Really? The dark moon? And everything's dying all around? Really? Yes, really? We're Jews. Yes. That is exactly when we celebrate renewal. That is exactly when we celebrate life, creation, existence, that we're here, that the person next to you is here, that the people who loved you into who you are, who taught you, who had so much patience and empathy, who grew you into who you are, all those people, that they existed, and that we stand on their shoulders and can remember them and honor them by living into their values. That's when we celebrate it, when it's dark, when everything around us is dying. Because it's very easy to give up and believe that there isn't a way to move this world out of what seems like chaos and into what we think it should be. Rebecca Solnit, in her book Hope in the Dark, says, "You row forward looking back." And telling our history is part of helping people navigate toward the future. We need a litany, a rosary, a sutra, a mantra. The past is set in daylight, and it can become a torch we carry into the night that is the future. We Jews know this. We Jews know this. That's why we read a story that's set 3,000 years ago. We read about Sarah and Abraham and Yitzchak and Hagar. We read our family history, our mythic history. Because looking back, we know you row forward looking back and carrying that into the future that can feel overwhelming, random, cruel, chaotic. So what advice do I have? What am I going to tell you? Turn off the news. That's one thing. Turn off the news. Many of you know I had hip replacement. My second hip, they are calling me Rabbionic now. My second hip replaced, and part of physical therapy for a hip replacement, most of physical therapy is walking. So I hate the treadmill. It's so boring, even with Netflix. I hate the treadmill. So I've been walking around my condominium complex, which is up in the Highlands, which is so beautiful. And so walking around it 7 times. Birds, lizards, snakes, spiders, all of it. The sky, the trees, getting just in touch with creation, with us being here at all, has been so helpful in these really stressful times. Get outside. We live in an incredibly beautiful place. Spend more time out there, in it, in creation, in nature. Celebrate natality by being around a young person. Whoever's phone that is, $100 to your favorite charity. Put yourself around young people. Give them ideas, inspiration, encouragement, affection. Play with them. It is so incredibly healing and important. And if you're concerned about the elections, whichever way it goes, if it doesn't go your way, then next day, volunteer for a campaign. Volunteer to make phone calls. Volunteer to reach out. Volunteer. Use your adulthood to move this world closer to what you think it should be. And when we get despair, when we get overwhelmed by despair, when we feel helpless, that's really when we have to take one action at a time. One small action at a time. Lehit amen, to practice. From the root, amen. I agree. But amen is also a craft. In Hebrew, an artist is an oman. Amen. I agree. Sign me on for what the world should be. But lehit amen is the other thing we have to do. We have to practice one action at a time. I'll close with the words of Nick Cave from this incredibly funky website called the Red Hand Files, where you can ask Nick a question and he answers you. So a 13-year-old asked Nick Cave, in a world ridden with so much hate and disconnect, how do I live life to its absolute fullest and not waste my potential? Nick answered that 13-year-old, read. Read as much as possible. Read the big stuff, the challenging stuff, the confronting stuff, and read the fun stuff too. Visit galleries and look at paintings, watch movies, listen to music, go to concerts. Be a little vampire running around the place, sucking up all the art and ideas and beauty you can. Fill yourself with the beautiful stuff of the world. Have fun. Get amazed. Get astonished. Get awed on a regular basis, so that getting awed is habitual and becomes a state of being. Absorb into yourself the world's full richness and goodness and fun and genius, so that when someone tells you it's not worth fighting for, you'll stick up for it, protect it, run to its defense, because it's your world they're talking about. Then, watch that world continue to pour itself into you in gratitude. Shana Tova.